So this fella here is a beautiful oldish trident maple, which got a bit of a history with me. It was originally a tree which was air layered, so it was a lot taller tree, probably about that much taller than what it is now. There's a bit of a history on it on my website. So you'll notice with this tree, a couple of things. You may well see it already, but the soil around the left and right side of the pot has been removed, because one of the first things I have to do is actually get this tree out of this pot and prepare the pot for the tree to go back in there. And it's quite a long, hard task. This tree's been in here for 3 years now. It was last repotted in 2017. So to get the tree out of the pot can take a bit of work, and I thought that I'd jump the gun a little bit, because it's nothing more boring than watching someone with a sickle drag rocks out of a pot. So I did want to show you this though. This tree, I hope you can see these roots on the surface here. They were growing up into one of the fertilizer tea bags that was removed just recently as we went into winter. So the tree's roots are very strong. That sort of fine root system is exactly what we want for our trees. So that's what's going to give the transpiration the kick along that it needs. So when the tree needs water, they're the sort of roots that we want to get. So I'll go through a couple of things with safety-wise. I always wear gloves when I'm working with the trees. One, because it's filthy work. Secondly, because there might be something sharp in the pot, or there might be something nasty in there. Either way, I like to protect it. I don't know if you'll see, but over in the background, over this side, there's 10 or 11 trees already which got repotted just the other days as the season got started. So by the time I finish repotting, I'll be anywhere up to about, I don't know, maybe 100 trees that have to get repotted. So your hands can get torn to shreds by the end of it. So always wear gloves. Other thing I always do is always put on goggles, because a couple of years ago when I was, as you'll see, this will get a bit messy later on, but as I was scraping all the soil away, a bit of dirt flicked up in my eye and made a bit of a mess. So now I wear these things, and they're lifesavers. All right, so first thing I have to do is I have to get the tree out of the pot. You'll see that the tree is actually tied in to the pot. You'll see there's some wire running here to here and wire running across here to here, and then there's the potting mesh holes in there, all fully intact as they are still. But I'm going to need to get this tree out of the pot. So the first tool that I'll use is a repotting sickle. Now these things are dead sharp, and you need to be really careful with them. When you're drawing it across the pot like this, if your hand is behind where the sickle is coming across, you'll actually cut yourself. Now, from experience, it bloody hurts. So just make sure that when you do it, you keep your hand well and truly away from where you're dragging. Now, the process isn't to cut it like a saw. The process is to just draw it across like that, just gently, bit by bit. You're not worrying about doing it all in one pass. You're just worrying about separating the tree from the edge of the pot. You want to break the bond where the roots actually grow into the pot. On some pots you'll find, especially the Chinese ones, the cheaper quality pots, you'll find where the lip of the pot curls over and the roots grow underneath that and down into the pot. To actually get that tree out of the pot, you need to cut right the way off and separate those roots that are growing up and under, because you'll physically have to break the pot when you're levering the tree out of the pot. So keep your hands back, make sure you've got your safety gear on, and just draw the blade across the pot like that. Don't do this on the lounge room floor, because you'll make a bit of a mess. I mean, I'm lucky I've got the workshop. If you're going to be doing this, you want to either put down some tarpaulin or have somewhere outside that you can do it. All right, so now all the way, three sides of that pot have been cleared out. So the front and the two sides have been cleared out. It's nice now. You can see the sickle's going through quite easily. It's ripping out a few little roots here and there, but that's no problem. All right, so now the next part I'll do, trusty wire cutters. Tilt the tree back like this. Cut the wires. And I'll cut those at the base of the holes where they come out of as well. You'll notice this pot too has it's got 6 holes throughout the pot. Now this is a nice Japanese pot, which I've found that the better the quality of the pot, more often than not, it means that there's more holes in there. Now the holes are one to let water out, but also to let air up into those roots. And you'll notice that if you've had a tree that's been in a pot like this for about 3 years, when they've only got a few holes in there, as you take the pot out, you'll get this rotten smell, and that's that damp water that gets trapped inside the pots, and starts to really do some damage. Now, short term, that's okay, because as the tree starts to grow again in spring, the water starts getting absorbed. But over the winter period, if that water just stays there stagnant, it will lead to root rot. So you want to try and avoid it if you can. And I think that if you'll find over time, as your trees get better, so too do the pots that you're going to use to house the trees. So the wires are cut now from underneath. The 3 sides have been released on the tree. This is a really important part. We've got to be careful. Now, I'm hoping you can see it from this side. I'll just put it up a little bit higher for you. So what I want to do is, if you've got a tree with bark on it, a pine or something like that, you've got to be really careful where you put your hand. So normally you'll put it up underneath a branch or something like that, where if you do damage to it, it's not going to be detrimental to the structure of the tree. You don't want to go grabbing the trunk of the tree, whatever you do, but you want to firmly hold one end of the pot, this side, and tilt the tree back like that. Now, because we've cleared out the 3 sides, it's freed the tree to slide forward and come out. And then what it looks like is that. So there's a nice mat of roots for the tree, which we'll get to next. So I'll pop that over here. And that's some of the roots that have come off. So in here you'll notice, see there's some of those bright white roots in there. Even though the tree looks like it's in full dormancy, these roots, these are the fresh new roots that are very brittle. So these ones here that will break at the slightest touch, that means the tree started to wake up. So the dormancy period's coming to an end, and that's why repotting happens now. I'll do my deciduous throughout the July period, and then I'll get into my pines and conifers and that sort of thing, and evergreens in August, because they're a little bit slower to get started. But that expenditure of energy has already started to happen. If I let it go too far and the whole thing starts to grow, then I've missed the boat. All right. So now, because I'm going back into the same pot, I've got to work reasonably quickly where I don't leave that tree with exposed roots, because anything that's exposed to air on that root mass will die. So I've got to get this cleaned out. I'll do a quick wipe over. So that's what the pot looks like now. So I'm going to start putting some mesh into that. And when you see this little hairline crack here too, that's not structural, so it's not an issue. It's when that runs right the way across the pot and up the side that there's a problem. But anyway, that's a nice part. For the holes in the bottom, I use potting mesh. So the size of the mesh is about 2.5 mil to 3 mil holes. And the reason I use this is because it allows for the water to flow out. Also allows for the really fine particles to flow out, so it doesn't clog up the root ball, but also lets the air in without letting the bugs in. Anything smaller, it can get clogged up. Anything bigger, like gutter guard or something like that, which you'll see around the place, can be too big, so it can still let the nasties get up into the bottom of the pot, and I don't like it. All right, so I'm just going to cut down some of this now, so it's bigger, slightly bigger, without being excessively large, larger than the size of the hole that I want to cover. 6 pieces. Okay. Now I use these are little bits of off-cut of wire that I've got. So when I'm repotting, I only use 2.5mm wire, because I find that if it's thinner than 2.5, so if it's 2mm, for most trees that I've got, it's not heavy enough duty to hold the tree in the pot. So I'm gonna use the wire to secure the mesh in the pot. Then I'm going to put tie-in wires that are going to actually hold the tree in the pot for the next 3-4 years that it's going to be sitting in there. If it's 3mm, I find it's a bit too thick. Now, the idea with using 2.5mm is that as the tree grows in the pot and stretches, like all those roots continue to grow and the tree gets higher and higher, that wire then starts to stretch and it snaps. I want the wire to snap before the pot snaps. So if I use 3mm, I've found that it can be a little bit too strong and actually hold the tree and hold the pot too tightly together. 2.5mm got enough give in it that it'll actually snap. 2mm not strong enough to do anything. All right. Now what I want to do is I want to use this little piece of wire. As I said, this is an offcut from previous repottings that I've got. I want to use that to hold this mesh into the bottom of the pot. What I'll do is, the email that you're going to get's got a fancier looped version of this, but this one I learned in Japan when there was a big line of trees that we had to repot and we had next to no time to do it. So they taught me to do this one really, really fast. What it is, I use my pair of pliers and I make a really, really sharp L bend like that, because I want the wire to sit as flat as I possibly can going into the hole of the pot against the rim of the hole. Then I'll measure this against that size of the hole to work out how wide I have to make my U. So you can't see it, but I'm going to measure across that hole, put my pliers inside, bend the wire, so I end up with a U that looks like that. Then that piece of wire is pushed through the mesh, comes out the bottom of the hole there, and then spreads to the side like that. So that piece of wire sits in here and holds that mesh in, so the mesh can't move no matter what happens to it. It's going to stay firm in that spot. So again, make a nice sharp bend. A common issue with these is that the bend isn't sharp enough, that it's sort of a sloping U. You don't want a sloping U, you want a really sharp right angle bend like that. Measure inside the hole to work out how wide the U has to be. Grab the wire with the pliers and bend it firmly with your fingers. Pop it through the hole. Again, through all 6 of the holes. So if you were repotting this tree into a pot that was different from this one, or let's say it's coming out of a black pot into a bonsai pot or something like that, then you would do this part first. You would have the pot prepared, ready to go. So when it came time for the tree to come out of the pot and start getting worked on, you had a pot that's sitting there like this, all wired up and ready to go. So it's got the tie-in wires, it's got the mesh held in place, and everything's ready to go. So you don't want to leave your tree exposed excessively more than what it actually has to be. I like to do this properly because, as I said, the tree is going to be in here for quite a long period of time, and cutting corners or maybe not doing things correctly now or using incorrect wire, you won't see the downside for it now, but in 12 months' time you possibly will. I like to tie I recommend everybody ties their trees into their pots regardless. What you hear, what you read, and whether you think it's necessary or not. Even if they're going back into a black grow pot of some kind, the reasoning for it is really simple in that you want the tree to grow you want the tree to spend its energy as efficiently as it possibly can. So if you've got a tree that suddenly wakes up from dormancy and starts growing out those roots, and you saw how brittle they were before with that one I showed you, then you haven't tied the tree in the pot because it was going to take too much effort, or there's too many trees, or whatever it is. Then the tree starts growing those fine, delicate roots. The wind blows the tree; those roots break really, really easily. Then the tree has to muster up the strength again to do it all over again. So even though you might think that the tree's been set back by repotting, or it's some other reason for the tree not being quite as strong as what it possibly should be, more often than not, it's because the tree hasn't been tied into the pot correctly, and the tree keeps wasting energy without getting the root mass that it needs to grow. All right. So I've got these. They look a bit long and shaggy at the moment. So I like to again just shorten those so they look just a little bit nicer, a bit more uniform. This is just nitpicking, but that's what bonsai is. Bonsai is about trying to get things as correct as what you possibly can, and it's only a little thing, but I like to have them so they all look nice and uniform. All right. Now I'm going to leave the pot laying face down on there. Next thing I need to do is I need to work out my tie-down wires that I'm going to be using and how long. How long do you make the wires? If they're too short, it's far worse than if they're too long. I'm going to show you. I'm going to let you on a four-way tie-down that we use for bonsai, and it's really secure around the pot. So having all these holes is a real luxury. Let's say I only had two holes. Let's say I had this one and this one here. Then I would always run two wires between those two holes there and feed them up and tie it around the base of the tree. But because I've got excess holes here, I've got 6, I'm going to do exactly the way it was tied in before. So I'm going to run a wire from this hole to this hole. I'm going to run a wire from this hole to this hole as well. Then I'm going to use those to tie it across the pots. So to work out how much wire I need, a simple, easy to use rule is take the wire, stretch it out, wrap it around about 2/3. I go from edge to edge of the pot round to the front, here like that. And I just cut the wire. Then take the wire, stretch it out, wrap it around the edges of the pot, get round to about 2/3 the total coverage, the 3/4. The wire. Now, because this is aluminium, you can straighten this out quite nicely. And what we want is this wire to sit perfectly flat on the pot. You don't want to have it where you've got a bit of an arc in the wire. You want that wire to be perfectly straight. Again, using the pliers, pick about, I don't know, let's say 1/3. It really doesn't matter exactly what it is, but let's say it's about 1/3. And do that sharp right angle bend that we did before. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure from the inside edge of this hole here to the inside edge of that hole there, because I want the wire to sit nice and tight against the edge of the hole. So when this wire goes in this hole, it's going to be right in there against the edge of the hole. You don't want to have any slack in this wire, because as we pull it and tighten the tree in later on, any slack that you've got is going to keep giving and giving and giving. What we want is, as we tie it in, it's going to hold firm and clamp the tree down. We don't want any movement on the tree. That's the objective of tying it in. So I put this one on the edge of the hole, measure over to this next hole, go with the pliers, nice and firm, and give it a nice sharp bend. So you want to end it so it looks a little bit like that. Nice and flat across the bottom here with a very sharp turns on the corners. Then feed it through the mesh. Again, this is why I like 2.5 mil, because this mesh that I've got holds that wire perfectly. It doesn't scrape its way through. It fits in quite nicely. So the next piece, same thing. Flatten it out. Take about 1/3, bend it up, and as I said, I would do this if I just had 2 holes in the bottom of the pot. Stretch it from that hole to this hole, using the inside edge of the hole. Clamp it, firm turn. Now, if you've got one edge or one end longer than the other, from these 2 holes to those 2 holes, I just spin it around. So one's longer on this side at the back, so I'm going to put the longer one onto this side at the front here. Again, it doesn't matter, but you'll see why when we go to tie this tree in. All right. Feed that through. Sits there nice and flush across the bottom of the pot. Fold it up. Get those wires. I bend them over. I get in the habit of bending the two wires that are connected towards each other like that. So when I'm, later on and I've got the tree and there's stones and dirt everywhere, I know which wires are connected to each other. So that's pot preparation. Mesh is in, wires are in, everything's ready to go. Okay, so I'll put that out of the way and move on to the tree. Okay. So you notice the setup here. I've got a nice tub to try and catch as much of this as I can. I've got a milk crate here. The milk crate is great because it allows me to get the tree up to more of an eye height level while I'm working. But it means that when I want to work on the bottom of the root ball, I can fold the tree over like that and not have the branches get damaged at the back there. Nothing's sitting or fouling against this part of the tree. So tools I'll use now, they're different, but there's three main ones that I'm going to use. So there's a single root hook, a heavy three root hook, and a finer one. So you could get away with just one of these. If I was going to have one and one only, it would be the single root hook because it can be used for the heavy work as well as the delicate work. But I'm going to work my way through these just to show you how they all work. I'll start with the three pronged bad boy first. Now, keep in the back of your mind while you're doing this that you're not looking to destroy the roots with this. You're always looking to free the roots up. You want the scissors that you're going to use. Just look a little bit like that, my root scissors. You're going to use the scissors to remove the roots. You don't want to just start tearing the roots off with something like this. Inevitably, it'll happen, but that shouldn't be your thought process. You shouldn't be in there hacking away at it like you're getting through some blackberries or something like that. You just want to gently try and work your way through it. As I said, some will fall off. We'll clean them up with the scissors and make it as clean as we possibly can. As I always say, everything with bonsai should be about surgical precision. It's not about slash and burn. It's about trying to get this done as best we possibly can for the health of the tree. All right, so this is where the goggles come in because this is where everything starts to spread. So there's still the tie down wires in the root ball. So you got to be careful with those. You don't ruin the scissors when you're cutting through those. Although the root scissors are fairly strong and fairly tough. You see the root ball starting to just sort of come apart a little bit. And you get to the point where you end up with stuff all over you. But you're going to need to start clearing some of this away with scissors. So I generally do about maybe a third to a half, and then I'll start working with the scissors to try and prune it away so I can see what I'm dealing with. As far as how much of the root ball we're going to remove, because it's going to go back into the same pot, I think about a third of the root ball is going to be removed as part of this process. Now I've also got some other tools over here which we may or may not need to use. It depends on what this looks like. Because this tree is coming out of being air laid, generally they've got a lot finer roots. They're not like something which is coming out of a black pot and it's got very thick, coarse roots that have grown for a very long time and need to be corrected as it goes into a bonsai pot. So this is a root cutter. If I do get any thicker roots that the scissors won't work through, I'll have to use something like this. And this creates a nice flat cut, which is what we want for the base of the tree. But like I said, hopefully I don't have anything like that. If we do, I'm ready for it. So here's some of the old mesh that the tree's grown into as well. I'm not really going to work on the sides of it just yet. I'm still going to work on the bottom on this first half. A nice even haircut. So you'll notice that the base, as I sort of turn it around, everything's sort of coming to the same level. I want it nice and flat on the bottom. Because I'm not doing an angle change or anything like that, I want to keep the root ball as flat and consistent as what I possibly can across the whole tree. And you'll see that I'm not not shearing the roots so they're completely flat. I'm still keeping them so they're slightly fluffy. It's really important to have the ability for those roots when they grow to take off, as opposed to being dead flat on a hard surface. Have them so they're slightly fluffed up and they're ready to run. All right, so now, I'm getting mess everywhere. Start working on the other side, doing the same thing. Mesh. So I do a little bit of raking, a bit of scissor work. So most of the trees that I've repotted this year so far are all in about the 3 to 4 years in the same pot mark, which is pretty normal. The younger trees might be a little bit less, around the 2 year mark. Nothing would really be in the 1 year mark for being in a pot. It's just not long enough for the tree to settle. And some of the older pines are around the 5 mark, but there might only be 1 or 2 that are possibly around 6 years, but they're the exception. They're not the rule with the trees. Once you start having issues with watering and the root ball starts to dry out, in the core especially. When you're repotting, I had a Chinese elm that I did yesterday that, as I worked around the outside periphery of the root ball and the base, it was all nice and wet. But as I got to about this part, the very core of the root ball had gone very dry. So I probably should have repotted that one maybe last year. That was at 4 years, I think it was. So yeah, I reckon 3 to 4 years is a good time. Nothing shouldn't be too much longer than that. Just removing any of these bigger roots. There's a few that sort of wrap down and around it. You can see that one, but it's not massive. It's only less than a pencil thickness. But I want to get rid of all of those ones and try and be left with nice clean cuts on everything that's left. Nice and flat, and just the finer roots. So you're removing any of these strong downward growing roots. Anything that's growing strongly effectively gets removed. And this, like I said, this tree, as I'll send you the link so you can have a look. This didn't have any of these roots a short period of time ago. It was ear-layered in 2013. So 7 years ago, it didn't have any of these roots. Now it's got this fine mass of roots, and that's why I think using the correct soil mix can make a massive difference for how quickly not only the top of your tree develops, but also the base. And the base is the foundation for what you want. Looking at these roots, nice fine roots, consistent sizing throughout the whole thing. That's perfect. That's ideal. That's what you want. Right. So now I've done the base of the tree. I'll move across to, and this is where I could use the single root hook as well. But I'll just move across to gently raking in a radial fashion. So I'm coming out from the trunk towards me, right the way around. And this is your opportunity to get rid of some weeds as well. I like to also get rid of the moss as I'm going as well. I'm just raking outwards like this, outwards and down. So this is where I start working the side of the root ball as well. Again, it's not that aggressive hacking movement. It's actually quite gentle. I'm just aerating and removing any of the roots that are crossing over each other like that are being removed at this point. So once I've fluffed this up a little bit, and I can see a nicer root ball like what's sort of starting to show around there on the tree. Once I can get that all the way around, then I'll start working with my scissors to prune that down as well. So as my thought process while I'm doing this is that if the pot sits very level like that, I want to remove my root ball so it flows downwards like that. So I want to get a nice slope on my root ball as it comes down here, very flat underneath, with it sloping down towards the sides. You can actually see the air layer part of the tree here. So if you see that straight line that was there, that's the part of the tree that was cut before these new roots could form 7 years ago. There you go, the roots are starting to look a lot nicer there now. A lot softer, a lot more open, and working with it too, I can see that the mix that was in last time is pretty consistent with what I've got now. There's just a fine mass of those fine hair roots. Here's one of the tie down wires too. So you can see how these grow back into the tree. I like this. Working your way around the tree like that. And all as much moss as you can as well. You're going to put one of the last things that we're going to do tonight is put sphagnum moss on top of the surface anyway. So all these roots that are being exposed by this moss coming off are going to be protected somewhere down the track anyway. So don't worry about that. By all means, you can save the moss if you'd like to, but if you need more moss, just look outside. There's bucket loads of it at the moment. There's the last of the wire in the bin. Walking around, no much fun. It's all like that. You can see, hopefully you can see, it's all fairly consistently raked out, all nice and fluffy on the edges. There's a few little bangy bits. I'll just go around now with the scissors and just cut. One of the benefits of having so many fine roots like this is you don't have to put a lot of thought into which roots you're going to remove and which ones you're going to keep. It's when you've only got a few roots with tufts of fine feeder roots on the ends of them, then you've got to be really careful. If you've got one big long root with a few roots here and a few roots back here, well, that's not enough to sort of support the tree. So you've got to be very careful when you're repotting a tree that looks like that, as opposed to something like this that has you know, an abundance of spare roots. Lopping a few off here or there is not gonna affect anything. It's not gonna damage any branches. It's not gonna cause any problems for you anywhere really. I should have mentioned also these scissors were sharpened just before we started tonight, so I like to ensure that all of my tools, whenever I'm doing anything on the trees, are in really good condition. And you know, you want the cuts that you're making now to be as precise and sharp as possible. You don't want the tree to have to stress over blunt tools making very rough cuts. Keep it as clean and as precise as what you possibly can. So you'll see that the angle of the root ball now is starting to slope down towards the edge of the milk crate. I'm giving room for the roots to grow underneath the pot and also on the sides and out the top as well. Just like giving you a haircut, which since we've been in isolation, I've cut 2 of my daughter's hairs now. My mum used to be a hairdresser, and I told her what I've done, and she's told me apparently it runs in the blood, so must be why I like pruning bonsai so much, she tells me. But my daughters are still talking to me too, so if anyone needs haircuts, just send me a message. Right, so that's starting to look pretty nice now. When you have a look around that, that's what it should look like. A nice tree that's ready to go back into its pot. The last thing I'm going to do with this tree, before we get it into the pot, is get an old toothbrush. Try and get rid of anything you can now. Like I said, this, you know, while you've got a tree in front of you, I think it's better to be thorough with it than just half. You know, you want to make sure that you're doing the best you possibly can, because you don't know when this tree is going to get back into the workshop again. And I'm cleaning away all the old moss. I don't like. People think I don't like moss. I do like moss. I really like moss, but I don't like the aggressive moss that grows up the trunks of the trees and does damage to the bark. I much prefer the tree to stand on its own 2 feet and not have some of that old bark get damaged by the moss. Footnote to this: I wouldn't do this with a black pine. Anything that's got a coarse bark, I definitely wouldn't do this with. I'd be using my tweezers and I'd be plucking as much of it off as I possibly could without damaging the bark. But this is a smooth bark tree, and I want to get rid of it as much as I can. There's a little bit of lichen here, which I'm not sure if you can see that. Now, lichen's a little bit different than moss. I see it's that whiter colour there. I actually quite like the lichen on the trees, so I'm not going to disturb that part. But any of the mosses, I'll get rid of. So it looks respectable. There we go. Yeah, you can see it's actually amazing. Like, this tree hasn't been in here for quite a while, and you can see the nabari spread down the base here and coming right the way across over here. Now, don't forget this tree was air laid 7 years ago, and by air layering I mean I've taken a straight portion of the tree, stripped all the bark out, forced new roots to grow out there, and those new roots in that short period of time, 7 years is not it's not a blink, but it's not that long, have forced the nabari of the tree to start spreading really nicely. So that's why I thought this tree would be good for this demonstration on repotting, because it's one that's got a little bit of history on it. There's a few crossing roots I've just seen here at the front too. I'll just get rid of those. Like a crossing branch, we don't want roots to be crossing either. Yeah. It's easy to leave this stuff for next time. It's far better to do it now. Far better. Okay, all right. I could nitpick here all day, but I think we're good to go. Yeah. Okay. All right. So that one is on the done pile. Let's go to moss. So I've just got a bit of housekeeping to do. Right, so the next part. So you guys just don't hear me walking on dirt constantly. It's nice having visitors back into the workshop again. It's been a while. Righto. So, now pot preparations. So you slowly put the wire and stuff like that into the pot before. Before I do anything now, I need to determine what the front of the pot is. Pots are like trees in that there's always a best way to view them. Now, the best way to view them can be by eliminating or not looking at what's wrong with the pot. So if your pot's got a chipped foot, or there's an imperfection on the pot or something like that, put that to the back. You don't want to look at that, because you look at the front of this pot for the next 3 years with repotting. So I try and look for features that I don't like in the pot. You know, like I said, the damaged piece or discoloration or something like that. Now this one doesn't have too much. It's got a bit of an imperfection, a dot just here. So I'm going to put that to the back of the pot. So for me, the front of the pot's going to be this side. So I'll face that towards you. One other thing I wanted to point out, so when you pick your pots and you're buying them from a nursery or something like that, you want to make sure that you test that those pots are level. So when you put them onto a firm surface, that you're not going to get any kind of rocking or any kind of movement in the pot itself. Any kind of imperfection in the pot will mean that the tree's going to be moving around. So try and get them where they sit dead level on the pot, on the surface of the benches as well. So you've got no movement in there. So first stage of pot preparation, scoria. You don't have to do this for the smaller trees, but I like it for the bigger trees. I've got scoria, which is about 5 to 8, 10 mil, something like that. And I'll put down a really light layer. I've put it through the sieve already, so I've got rid of the finest components that are 2 mil under. But you don't need a lot of this. Which what you do need is a nice, smooth, consistent layer. Now this is your final drainage layer of the pot. So it should look like that. Okay, so it's just a nice even layer of the scoria in the bottom. Then what I do is I've got the potting mix that I use. You guys should hopefully know it's just it's scoria, pumice, and pine nuggets. I recommend that you sieve the soil before you use it. Always sieve it if you can. And when I say sieve, I use one of these. It's got interchangeable pot mesh, interchangeable mesh sizes. The smallest one that you can get, which is about, looks like about 1.5 mil thereabouts, something like that. That's what I'd use to put the soil through and sieve it backwards and forwards and try and get rid of all the fines. If you don't want to, if you don't feel inclined to, that's fine. But the first watering that you do with your tree, you've got to make sure it's really thorough, because you want all that water to flush out any of those fine gritty bits that are stuck in this mix at the moment. Right, so what I'll do with the mix is just put a really fine layer over the top of that scoria mix. I'm not trying to disturb the scoria mix. I'm just trying to put a coating over the top, so it's like a layer on top of another layer. And again, it's not super thick at this stage. Just a nice consistent coating right the way over. Then I'll finish with a mound in the middle. And I'll explain that mound to you. So the reason why I've got a mound in the middle is on the underside of this root ball, even though it's very, very flat, there's always going to be little divots and little imperfections around that surface there. What I'm going to use the mound for is to put that on top of the mound, and as I push it down, that mound is going to go up into those areas where there's little cavities. If you don't, what's going to happen is any roots that are attached to a cavity, an air pocket in the potting mix, are going to die. That's going to have an impact, because you're actually losing real estate for those roots. Nothing can grow where there's no potting medium. So you want to make sure that you have your little mound in the middle, you take your tree. Again, the front of the pot is towards you guys, so I'm going to put the tree into the pot with the front facing towards you guys. Now, this is the important part. So it's sitting really, really high at the moment. I'm not worried about positioning or anything like that too much at this stage. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to shimmy. And what's going to happen is that mounded root mass, the mound of soil is going to go up into the root mass, and I'm going to suddenly find that it gets a lot harder to move the tree around. And it's got almost no give in it now, so that means that mound is there, has dispersed right the way across evenly across the soil. Now the tree's not moving as it is now. I've got my tie down wires, which I'll get up and ready now. But before I do anything with anything on this tree, I want to have a look at it and make sure that it's going to be right, because where I'm putting this tree now, where I'm positioning it, is where it's going to stay for the next 3 years. So if I'm not happy with it, now's the time for me to take it out, redo it all, fix it, and correct it before I get stuck with something that I'm not going to be happy with. I think now's the chance for you two to look at your trees and think if you do need to have an angle change, try and have nothing that's too straight at any one point. Try and get something with a bit of a tilt or a bit of a bend on it. You can do that with potting, so putting a bit more mix under one side of the root mass, you can sort of tilt it a little bit as well. I'm not talking 45 degrees or anything like that, but you can definitely make minor changes to the tree by getting the soil balance in the pot a little bit adjusted. All right, so that looks pretty good. Now you'll notice just a few technical things with this one. So this is an informal upright, so it's not a slanting style. It's not a formal tree, but it sort of moves around a little bit. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get the apex of the tree above the centre of the pot. I like to have my trees positioned in the centre of the pot. Some people like them off centre. That's fine. I don't mind. The only thing I would say is if you plant any part of the tree too close to a wall, then the roots on that side of the tree don't have the distance to grow. So you'll find that the roots will be stunted on this side. It might look nice for you when you're looking at it, but it's not practical for the tree to get good, consistent root growth. So you want to make sure that wherever the tree trunk is, it's far enough away that those roots can spread out before they hit the wall and then start to deviate and start to move. All right. So now we need the wire cutters and the pliers. And this is where the 4-way tie down comes in. So you'll notice that there's a couple of longer ones and there's a couple of shorter ones, all on opposite corners to each other. So what I'm going to do is I'm trying to work this out so you guys can see it at the best possible angle. I'm taking the shortest one. Let me bring this closer. All right. You can look at some wiring of a tree now. All right, so I'm taking the shortest one from the back here and I'm folding it to this first longest one at the front here. I'm grabbing the back wire and I'm pulling the tension, pulling any slack out of it. And this is where those sharp U-bends that we put in the bottom of the pot really come into play. So I'm grabbing these two wires together and I'm twisting about 1, 2, 3, about 4 times. So I'm not looking to secure the tree with that turn at this point. All I'm looking to do is fasten the 2 wires together. So you notice that there's still the long one at the front and the back one now is quite short down here. So then I'm going to rotate the tree around. I'm going to grab that long one, take it across the front of the pot, and you'll see that when I do this, see how the wire is going around the edge of the root ball? It's not actually cutting up into the nabari. So if I had 2 holes in the middle of the tree, in the middle of the pot, and I was putting wire in, they would want to cross over and clamp towards that tree. By doing this 4-way tie down from hole to hole to hole to hole and then back to the first one, I'm creating a clamp around the root ball and pushing it down from outside rather than having it creep up towards the center of the tree and doing any damage. So this one comes across here, the long one, across the front. I pull any slack out of the wire. You've got to be careful too, another thing. You don't want to over tension this. You want to grab the 2 wires together, pull them, use your thumbs and finger to tension on the wire, and then make your hand that's turning really slack, so you're not pulling on that wire. You don't want to stretch the wire and have it snap when you're at this point. So again, it's about 3 or 4 turns. It's not too much. If you start to see the wire where you're making the turns go white, it means that it's about to snap. It means that you've tensioned it too much. So again, there's one small wire here and there's one longer wire. So I rotate the tree around, I grab the longer wire, pull that across towards the back, take the slack out of it, grab the long wire that's left at the back here, grab these two, turn it about 3 or 4 times, like that. Again, I've got one small one here and one long one, but I've got nothing to tie it to. So what I have to do is grab another piece of the 2.5mm wire that I used at the start. It doesn't need to be too long. That long. And I'll make a loop at the end of this, just like that. I feed that through. So the first wire that I ran across the back there, I'm just putting this underneath that wire there to create an extension. So it comes through like this. You guys can see it's that wire there at the base. Just pops up and comes through like that underneath that first wire that comes across. I then just create a tension on this one as well, just to fasten it. Really, it's nothing fancy. It's just tightening that wire. So then I've got this long wire, the last long wire here, this last one, and I've got that new wire that I've just put on there. I'm going to bring those two wires together. I'm going to use that to fasten. So I'll just pull the slack out of the wires like that and like that. Clasp the two in the middle. And this is the important part. This is where all your tensioning comes together. So you turn it about 3 or 4 times and it starts to go firm. Then I pull the wire, pinch it with my fingers either side of that wire, and then tighten it again. Then pull, pinch, and then tighten. So what I'm making sure that when I tighten with the pliers, there's no tension on it whatsoever. The tension's all in my fingers holding that wire. Then I'll get the wire cutters, go around, clean it up. And they're the scrap that I use for doing the potting mesh on the next tree when I'm fastening that into the pot. Let's cut all those off, make it look pretty. I do my test, I pick it up and I shake it around like that and nothing moves. So that's exactly what I want. I've got a tree that now is firmly in that pot. You know, a dog can knock it off the pot, off the bench, and I won't have a problem with it because it's firmly in there now, and that 2.5mm wire is strong enough to do the job. All right. Which is really easy. Just start putting it around the edge that I've mounted down. Like that, using your fingers to help push the mix in as well. Like I said, nothing fancy yet. So it's a bit messy at the moment. Then I'll take a piece of bamboo or a chopstick, something like that. I like these big long chopsticks that you can get at the Asian grocery stores. You know, a couple of bucks for a pair of them or something like that. Because when you've got a really big tree with lots of branches on it, it means that you can do this stuff through a very heavily, densely ramified tree. So the process for this next part is where I will use my fingers and a chopstick. This is not a jackhammer. You're not looking to smash this into the pot to settle things down. What you're trying to do is you're trying to eliminate any cavities that have formed between the soil particles, and you're gently working this into the root mass that's down there below. if you look at jackhammering this or jamming the chopstick in there repetitively, the only thing you're going to achieve is damaging more roots than what you've already cut. Now, we talked about that need to be surgically done, the root pruning, and have them as nice and clean as possible. You're undoing all of your hard work if you start jamming this in. So my left hand is gently working my way, helping to push down the particles without compressing them ridiculously. The other one is getting in there and finding any soft spots or any cavities like what I've just found there, and working the mix into those areas. So I'm not undoing any of the hard work that I've already done. I'm just trying to make sure that I've got no spaces. I had a black pine a couple of years ago where it's I thought it might have had a disease, and it wasn't probably growing quite as well as what it should have. And it was I like to have the pots very small, I suppose is the word, or fitting for the tree. So even though they're a big tree, I don't like them to be in an excessively large pot. So I do like it where the nabari, the basal roots do come into fairly close contact with the side of the pot. I think it looks really nice and adds to the age of it. Anyway, this black pine had a section around the back of the tree, much like what this one's got, where the soil mix hadn't been worked in properly. And I remember when I did it at the time, because it was such a big tree, it had taken me ages, and I sort of cut corners by the end of it and didn't do this part properly. And when I took the tree out to repot it, there was a cavity, not just a small one, but probably, if this is the width of the pot, it was probably, maybe a half the width of the pot, and the whole depth of it, where there was a cavity going in 1 to 2 centimetres, where the soil and the roots had all died back from the exposure to the air, where the soil hadn't been placed. So my tree's health just kept suffering, and I couldn't work out what it was. I kept looking for an excuse, or looking for a cause, and it was me not doing the right thing and taking my time and doing things as properly as what I probably should have. So I don't recommend you repot when you've got to be somewhere in 5 minutes. I recommend that you do this when you've got time to do it properly, and never do more than one tree at any one time. Just make sure that you get it done properly. And if one tree is enough for the day, well, then one tree is enough for the day. Don't set yourself a target to repot 30 trees in one day, because by the 20th tree, you'll be cutting corners, and you won't see it for a little while. Anyway, so good news on that black pine. I repotted it last year, found out what the problem was, and made sure that I still went back into the same pot, still positioned the same way correctly, but definitely worked the soil mix in a lot better, and the trees recovered really, really well. I did miss a year of decandling, so I put it behind a little bit further than what I'd like, but that's my fault, not the trees. All right. Again, it's really important when you're doing this not to overdo it. You don't want to do this part for like an hour. What I'm feeling for is, as I'm moving this around, if it feels firm, if there's resistance against it, then I'm stopping. It's only when I get to a really soft spot, or a part where the particles just start slipping away and going down to the edge of the pot, that I'll stop and give it some extra love. But other than that, it's pretty much ready now. So just work it through. One hand gently compressing the soil, one hand with the chopstick. And it can be any size chopstick. It doesn't need to be a big one. It doesn't make it special because it's large. And a final press down of everything. Now you'll notice that there's some pretty big potting medium sitting on top of this thing, which it's probably not the best, the nicest look in the world. So I will use my little hemp brush and gently just brushing with the back of the brush away from the tree, making a lot of mess on the ground. It takes away the large particles and leaves the smaller stuff on top. Makes it look a lot nicer. Alright, I'll scrape up all the stuff on the ground and reuse that later on. But for now, it can go down there. Okay. So one more look. It's really good. Very satisfied with that. Okay, now here we go. We've got another thing to consider with this tree and repotting is now we've got this into a nice open mix, which is what I encourage. What you see really good growth with. The trouble with those open pores, spaces that you've got in the potting mix, is that it creates air spaces a fair way down the first part of the pot, and it's all about that real estate for the roots to grow in. So I need to put something on there to protect it. I use sphagnum moss. Now, sphagnum moss you can buy at Bunnings or at any hardware store. It comes in big packets like this. I think I actually get it from New Zealand. Is where it comes from. Yeah, New Zealand. But when the sphagnum moss comes out, it looks like this. It's in big long clumps. It's very thick. And not that nice. Like in an orchid or something like that, that's fine. But for what we want, it's not. What I do with mine is I recommend that you use a breathing mask, because when you put this sphagnum moss through a sieve, it creates these really fine fibres, and I know I've had some irritation with my breathing, so I always use a face mask when it comes to that. And there should be plenty of face masks floating around now in Melbourne anyway. So you the process is you just grab the sphagnum moss and you force it through a sieve. This sieve is about, I don't know, 6 mil, something like that. Sieve. It's nothing too small, nothing too big. And what we end up with is this really fine sphagnum moss, which is all broken down. Once it's all broken down, I take it and I put it into a bucket like this, and I fill that bucket with water, and I make it into a slurry. So it all congeals together, and I want to put a nice even layer right the way around the whole surface of the pot. I'm not caking it on. When I put it on, I'm really only putting on a few mil, because all I'm trying to do is I'm trying to protect the surface roots. That's my primary ambition at the moment, is to protect those surface roots. So I put it on and I pat it on. So you're not lumping it on like that and just leaving it where it's a big thick coarse lump like that. What you're doing is just spreading it on there finely, and you're patting it into the soil surface like that. So it actually gets into the grit itself, into the soil mix. It can go right up over the exposed roots on the barri as well. You just keep working your way around. One of the other reasons I really like this is it provides an environment where those surface roots, or any of the roots that have been cut, heal very quickly with the sphagnum moss on there. When they're exposed to air, the roots will die. They have no choice but to die when they're exposed to the air that we breathe. So by putting sphagnum moss on there, you're helping them be in an environment where those roots can heal as quickly as possible with minimal stress, which is what we're trying to achieve. The other thing, and this is one of the kickers with using sphagnum moss, is my trees, as you'll see from over here, some of these were repotted the other day, and they're all got this yellowy colour sphagnum moss on them. Now, as the trees start to wake up and they start taking moisture, they start drinking what they've got kept in the soil mix, the sphagnum moss starts to change colour, and it goes from the yellow colour back to this sort of a white colour. So when you've got the two, one's wet and one's dry. So I use it as a telltale for me that I know that a tree that I've recently repotted may need some water when this starts to dry out, and I won't water it again until I start to see that sphagnum moss start to dry up, because it means that there's activity happening in the roots. So if I just continually keep watering the tree, even though it's not taking up the moisture that's there, I'm going to create an environment which is far too wet for the tree, and it's going to cause the roots to potentially rot. So it's a nice telltale for me while they're in the workshop here, and I'll stay in the workshop for up to sort of 3 weeks, or until I can see that on a very regular basis, almost every day, that the trees are taking up the moisture, and therefore they're starting to get some root activity. By that stage, you'll see that the buds on the tree will have activated as well, and you'll start seeing there'll be foliage up here. There'll be everything's starting to happen with the tree. hopefully we'll have some warmer weather outside. It won't be -15, and we'll have some sunshine out there again, and things will be looking rosy. And that's when it's time for the tree to go outside and get put into a spot where it can be protected from those occasional frosts that we'll get during the early spring as well. So that's something which will cause damage to your trees, is frost. You do want to make sure after repotting that it's protected for quite a while from the frost. Right. Like I said, you're only going to do this once every 3 odd years, so it's worth doing it properly. You'll hear that's really patted into the soil mix. The tree's nice and firm, and it's all looking good. So that's repotting 101. As I said, it's a lovely old tree. It's been with me for a while. It's had a massive change in life, going from being air laid to and as a stump to being developed into a tree. I still think it's got a fair way to go. As you can see, there's some longer branches, which are sacrifice branches, still trying to develop the correct balance with the tree. But that's it. So the last phase with repotting, which you guys won't see, is that this tree is going to be thoroughly watered, and I mean absolutely thoroughly watered. This first watering is the most important watering that you'll give your tree ever, because anything that's in there, any silt, any small particles, anything that can congeal around those drainage holes in the bottom of the pot and set like concrete and stop the tree from getting that air-water transfer that it needs through its root system, needs to be washed out in the first wash. And you've only got the first wash to do it, because after this, that's it. It'll set against the particles and you'll have all sorts of issues. If you start watering your tree, go away and come back 10 minutes later, too late. What you need to do is make sure that you're watering it consistently with a nice watering rose or something like that, something that's coming up and over. You don't want to direct spray onto the surface. You want to come up and over onto the surface and gently flood out. I put mine onto the milk crate or onto a trolley I have out there that's got a mesh base on it. And what I'm looking for is, my telltale to let me know to stop watering is that water coming out the bottom of the pot is consistently clear. When you first start, you'll find it might be a little bit red, it could be milky, it could be whatever, and you'll be surprised how much actually is going to come out with that first water. So you can maybe do it over a tray or a bucket or whatever you want if you want to reuse the water, but it's more important to get the roots cleaned as thoroughly, get the mix cleaned as thoroughly as you possibly can, as opposed to how much water that you're actually using, and that's it. They will get a sea salt bath in about 3 to 5 days as well. So for now, it's a water. It's a come inside, state of the elements. At home, you might find that you can put it into a garage or something like that. They don't need to be in a sunny spot. They don't need sun. They don't need air. They definitely don't need the wind. So just for now, put them into a sheltered spot, as sheltered as you possibly can give them within your own environment. Like I said, mine's sitting here. They don't get anything for probably 3 weeks. A little bit of water here and there as they start taking it. Sea salt maybe once or twice in that time as well. Nothing too much. Don't go over the top with it. And that's it. You should hopefully start to see some buds starting to move relatively soon. A few of my trees have already started to pop, so it's go time for repotting. I hope you enjoyed it. I've loved it. Thank you for tuning in. I really appreciate it. It's nice to know that there's so many bonsai lovers out there that share the same passion that I've got. So if you have any questions going forward after this, please shoot me an email at scott@bonsaimatsu.com or get in touch however you'd like to. Please stay in touch and let me know how you go. Thanks for joining.